Hello and welcome to the Deb Calvert channel here on Bright Talk. I'm so glad that you joined me here today. I'm really struck by something unique about the registration for this particular presentation. I always go in and take a look to see who's registered, and then I try to make sure that I cover the right points depending on the audience. But this particular topic seems to have some really universal appeal. We've got people who listed job titles as students, interns, managers, people from all different kinds of functions, and even a few who come from the C-suite. I think this topic does have some appeal no matter what job station you're in, what type of function you have, or where you sit on an org chart. So I'm going to try to keep this as broad and sweeping as possible to meet the needs of everybody who's listening. Our objective today, the reason for offering a topic like this, is of course to strengthen your leadership capacity, and I do mean your leadership at any level, by providing you with a perspective on how you can be successful by using your failures to your advantage. I'm even going to encourage you in this session to strive for more failures, because we'll be talking about how to recover from them and how to make the most of them. Now that is where I'm going to start today. I'm going to start by talking about the F word, failure, and we're going to talk about some new ways to look at failure and how it can actually help you. From there, we'll then talk about risk-taking and getting the courage you need to do that. For those who are new here, thank you for being here. Let me just walk you through some of the logistics. First thing I want to point out is that on the lower right-hand side of your screen, there's an orange button. It says Get Live Support Now. If you have any difficulties at all during this presentation, rather than posting them to me as a question, go ahead and go straight to that orange button, because the folks at Bright Talk, they're going to fix you up. They're going to take much better care of you than I can as I'm conducting this presentation. Second thing I want you to be sure and notice is that there is a tab called Attachments and Links, and I try to load those up with some various goodies. I'll describe them as we go forward here. But the first one I want to point out to you is that I have included a PDF of today's slides. I know that a lot of viewers like to download those right at the beginning of the presentation to take notes and follow along. So please feel free to do that if you'd like. I'm Deb Calvert, and I present on this channel once a month to a broad audience of HR and managers and leaders at every level. This is one of the webinars in that particular series. And I encourage you to look and see some of the other topics that we've recently covered, like communication and managing change. Some of our upcoming topics perhaps might be of interest for you. I also present once a month directly to sales managers and help that particular audience to grow in their capacity and confidence as well. I have worked in both sales and in HR. I've been in business for myself with People First Productivity Solutions going on 14 years. But prior to that, I held a position as a senior director in an HR function with a Fortune 500 company. And I've been very lucky throughout my career, very fortunate to work with a huge variety of different types of companies and functions. So when I speak to you, I'm speaking to you from that experience as an executive coach and someone who's a pretty good observer. I'm bringing to you what I've seen work for others and where I've seen others struggle. My company is putting people first. That's our mission. People First Productivity Solutions. We help you build organizational strength by putting people first. And that notion of putting people first, that includes talking about topics like this one, the tough stuff, the elephants in the room that nobody really wants to talk about, the elephants in the room that hold people back and keep them from realizing their full potential. I have a favorite word. You've probably never heard this word before, which is unfortunate because it's such a good word. The word is entelechy. It's spelled E-N-T-E-L-E-C-H-Y, entelechy, and it's relevant today. It means unleashing potential. And ultimately, that's what we're all about at People First Productivity Solutions, and I hope that that's something that you take away from our time together today. Now, there are reasons, valid reasons, deeply held reasons and rationales that we don't take more risks in the workplace. They run the gamut from, hey, we just are too busy, we've got to keep this ship moving forward. We're too busy to take risks where we don't know what lies ahead. We'd rather go with the proven path because that's all we have time to do. Or sometimes we don't take those risks because of our self-doubt or our fear of recrimination or just the trouble it takes to step outside our comfort zone, both rationally and emotionally. And of course, many of us have a low risk tolerance. And let's face it, there's also the fact that no one really likes to fall or to falter or to fail. It hurts, so we don't do it. We stay in our comfort zone, we take the proven course of action, but I'd like to suggest that maybe that isn't the best choice. Maybe sticking to what we already know is inherently self-limiting. So I'd like to introduce some different ideas so that you can make decisions based on being fully informed about your options, including the potential risk of failure. We'll start by redefining failure. I've drawn up some contrasts here. I'd like to think about reading these in rows. For example, failure is a delay, failure is not a defeat. What's on the right-hand side tends to be our emotional reaction to even the idea of failing. And we don't think of it as often in the ways I've presented in the left-hand column. There's a quote I really like. The quote is, it is how you cope with failure that shapes you, not the failure itself. That comes from Carol Hyatt and Linda Gottlieb in a book. It's an old book. It's called When Smart People Fail. Hyatt and Gottlieb, in that book, they stress that failure doesn't lie in the event itself. It lies in how we see that event and what we learn from it. And they go on to say, if you are a learner, it's possible, without changing those events, to make the concept of failure disappear. Now, I think that's a really lofty goal. I like it, though. The concept of failure, if not disappearing, at least being diminished, so it's not something that is oppressive to us. And as you're looking at these contrasts, the one I really want to be sure to point out to you is the last one. Because if you can think of failure as a learning opportunity, if you can own that failure and take it and make of it what you want to, then it no longer is a single event. But you can't let the failure own you, because it doesn't, and it doesn't define you. There's no such thing as a person who is a failure. On the left-hand side, we're spelling it your, Y-O-U-R, you're a failure, you own it. On the right-hand side, I think that's a misspelling. If we add a couple of characters, if we say Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, your failure, well, that's just not accurate. And we shouldn't let the feeling that we're going to be a failure define or decide what we do. It's not valid. We're going to own that failure, whatever it might be, no matter how big it might be. We're going to seize control of it, and we're going to deliberately choose, with any failure, to learn and grow from it, because we can accept that failure is inevitable, and that failure, it's a detour. It's not a dead end. We just have to figure out another way to get where we want to go. But let's go ahead and keep breaking this down. So think of failure more in the right-hand column as we proceed here. And let's talk now about why we fail. Here's just a sampling of reasons. We all do fail, by the way. It's inescapable. It's unavoidable, so we might as well accept that we're all going to fail at some point. Sure, it's unpleasant and it's uncomfortable, but if we think of it as a learning opportunity and a way to grow, as a pathway to our success, then we can do more with it. But even so, even with that attitude, there are some reasons that we fail. And I'll just give you an example here. In fact, I'll try to model some vulnerability as I do. I'll tell you, most of you don't know me personally, so this will be a big revelation, but the truth is that I have been failing to maintain my ideal weight for my entire adult life. I have failed in that quest for every one of these reasons on screen. And certainly I've at times succeeded. And I've learned along the way, too. Every single time that I fail, I do improve my chances for success. I'm better at this today than I was 20 years ago. I do know that the last item on screen, never trying, the only way to really, truly, infinitely fail. And I've done that. There have been times when I've just thrown my hands up, I've given up, but I've made no effort. It's the worst way for me to not succeed. So if we are to be aware of these reasons why we fail, and then to make deliberate choices instead of failing and stopping, instead, when we fail, to use it as a learning opportunity, that's what I'm referring to as failing forward. Failing forward is a shift in perspective because it's about changing the way you think about your failure, Y-O-U-R, the failure that's yours, that you own, you embrace. Now, of course, if you're like most people, you feel like failure is something to be avoided at all costs, and it's something to hide. You might even think of it as something to be ashamed of. But the truth is, no one, nobody, ever succeeds the first time every single time. And when you think of those people you respect, the people you admire, you'll soon realize that what's noteworthy about them, it's not their success alone. It's how they achieved that success. It's about the hardships they endured. It's about the tenacity they exhibited or the adversity that they overcame. Like them, we are all more likely to fail than we are to succeed. We are going to fail more often than we succeed. And it's up to us whether we use our failures wisely or not. To use them wisely, we have to be willing to face them. We can't be humiliated by them or running away from them. We have to face them head on. That's how, by owning them, we extract what they can teach us. That's how we learn something about whatever we were trying to do, and we also learn something about ourselves. And maybe we also learn something about other people. But we have to mine for that information. We have to dissect the failure. We have to find the lessons that we can learn, and we can't try to suppress any attention around that failure. Otherwise, we'll miss the opportunities. So let me give you some tips then, how to do this. The next time you fail, and if you haven't failed in a while, go out and try something you've never done before, something that you're sure to fail in, just so you can practice these concepts. After failing, try to depersonalize it. Don't blame others and don't blame yourself. There's absolutely no good that comes from blame and shame. We can't do anything with that. It's counterproductive. So we're going to get over it. We're going to depersonalize it. We're going to just get rid of the blame and shame, and we're going to instead be neutral and objective, and we're going to look at this thing. We're going to stop kicking ourselves because everybody fails. We're going to think about people like Steve Jobs. Right? He was a billionaire, and he ran 2 successful companies simultaneously, both Apple and Pixar. But do you remember his next computer? No, probably not. The reason that you don't remember that is because it failed miserably. And while you must analyze your mistakes, you won't learn anything if you're too busy beating up on yourself. That's what Jobs said. And it's why he didn't dwell on the failure of next computer. He moved on, he learned, he innovated, he took that information, and he continued to create something else. So we have to analyze it in the very same way. Let me give you another example. There's a reason that sports teams watch films of the game shortly after they play the game. Now, they already know the outcome, whether they won or lost, and every player already knows where they screwed up and where they contributed to the team. So what's the purpose of watching those films? Well, the purpose of watching the film, of rewinding, of putting it into slow motion, of analyzing it, is so that no matter whether or not you succeeded or failed, you have an opportunity to learn and grow and do things differently the next time. You can replicate what worked. Maybe you can even build on it. You can see exactly when, in slow motion, the moment where you made the slight mistake that led to the ultimate failure. You own it, you practice and drill so that you no longer do it that way, and you're more successful the next time out. So we're redefining failure. I asked a large company once how it dealt with employees' failures. And what I was told was, we don't have failures. We have learning experiences. At the time, I lived in Silicon Valley in California. And one reason that area breeds innovation and so many new companies is that when someone has started a company that later fails, they're not considered a failure. They're considered an innovator. They're considered an experienced entrepreneur. It's a badge. It's something to be proud of when you've tried and failed and learned and grown and gone on to brush yourself off and do something next. And that's what we're after, is this next perspective, like the one that Jobs modeled for us. We got to jump right back in. We have to attempt something again. We have to focus on the future, because the future is what we can change. We can't change the past. We learn from that failure. We learn, too, from our past successes so that we replicate what's worked and we eliminate whatever it is that didn't work. Let me put this into a little schematic for you. The first model, that tends to be how most people think about failure. We only think that there's two possible paths, the one where we fail, and that takes us one direction. It's a bad direction. We don't want to go there. Or the one where we succeed, and that takes us to glorious places, the places we dream of being. But it's actually the second model that's more accurate. And frankly, it's a healthier perspective to acknowledge that going into any decision that you make or any action you take, what's between you and success is failure. And if you can accept this, you'll be liberated to try new things and to take risks. Success is our destination. Failure is the vehicle that gets you there. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that failure is not just a possibility. Failure is a requirement if you want to succeed. Okay, so now we know the destination, we know the vehicle. All we need now is the fuel, and that would be courage. More specifically, what we need to get us there is the courage to be able to fail, to get into that car and to keep on driving. We need the courage to take some risks. So we have to talk about courage. We're doing some definitions here today, some reframing. Courage is not reserved for some select few who happen to be born with it. That's not accurate. Courage is something we muster. It's not something that we have. And courage isn't displayed inside our comfort zone. In fact, courage isn't even something we need. It's not something we think about until we get outside of our comfort zone. And by the way, let me point out to you that one of the attachments that you have there is a little infographic about your comfort zone. You might decide to download that and use it as a reminder of what we're talking about here today. Courage also isn't going to require you to be irresponsible. You're still, even in that moment when you're displaying courage, you're not going to be reckless. You're going to calculate the risk. You're going to calculate the possible rewards. And with courage, you're going to go for it when the rewards are with it. You're going to go for it even when it feels like it's not there, because courage isn't something that is or isn't there. Courage is something you put into yourself. It's a decision. It's a choice that you make. Courage is an action. It's a decision. It's not some elusive quality that you have to sit around and wait for. It's not going to fall upon you. You have to go out and make it. To make courage, to manufacture it, to put it into yourself, there are some qualities that help. These are the qualities of people who more often are thought to be courageous. So consider these the raw ingredients, and when you put them together in a recipe, you're going to bake courage into yourself and to a situation. Let me just pause here and give you a moment to reflect on these courage qualities. What I'd like you to do here is a mini self-assessment. Think about which of these qualities you routinely exhibit and which ones you might work to build. Your objective, of course, as you're flagging this, is to leverage whichever one of these or ones of these are already a strength for you. If you are already confident, you're going to use that confidence to get comfortable even when you're in the midst of ambiguity. If you're someone who is self-motivated, you're going to use that strength to be motivated to improve the status quo. So you're going to leverage your strengths, and then you're going to practice. You're going to practice little by little in the area or areas you need to build. You're not going to try to find all of these qualities, all these characteristics all at once in some critical moment. Instead, you're going to practice in the day-to-day. You're going to push yourself just a little bit in any one of these areas that you need to, in the moments that don't count as much, when the stakes are not as high. And the more you practice, the more you're going to find these are coming to you naturally. If you're not someone who's naturally resilient, for example, well, you can go out and you can learn a little bit more about resilience. And then you can push yourself. When you're not feeling resilient, you can work on that day to day, little by little. And you're going to eventually become more and more resilient. From that, since you now have that ingredient in your shopping cart, you'll be able to use it when you need it to bake courage into a situation. Above all, remember that being courageous is just a choice. It's a choice that you get to make. You're the one who's in control. Let's talk about risk as well. I do want to point out to you, maybe you've never thought of it this way before, but there is risk in everything you do. Everything. Think about it. If you shake someone's hand today, you might catch a cold. If you change the CD in your car as you're driving home today, well, you might have a car accident because you took your eyes off the road. If you roll your eyes at something that your significant other says or something your boss says, you might have to deal with hurt feelings. If you wear the wrong shoes, your feet might hurt by the end of the day. Right? These are all risks. And we tolerate those risks because we're accustomed to them. And we don't think about them. We don't magnify them and make them bigger than they actually are in our day-to-day. For most of human history, though, risk and survival have gone hand in hand. We avoid many risks because they feel threatening to us. But when most threatened, we sometimes take the biggest risks of all because our survival instinct is so strong. That's why people jump out of 20-story windows when a building is on fire. Webster's defines risk as exposure to the chance of injury or loss. But I actually think that's only part of the equation. I prefer a different definition. The Chinese write risk, Mandarin, the word risk is written by using two characters together. And those two characters are danger and opportunity. And I prefer that definition because, to me, it expresses both the downside, the danger, and the upside, the fact that there is opportunity. There might be something positive that comes from taking the risk. So try to think of it in that duality. Don't let risk be some great big boogeyman that's bigger than it actually is. Face the risk so that you can assess it objectively and you don't just react to it emotionally. Risk-taking, of course, it has a certain negative connotation because it gets associated with being reckless. So I want to talk about intelligent risk, not death-defying, Evel Knievel type of risks. Intelligent risks are the opposite of dumb risk. Dumb risk would be the ones where the odds are clearly stacked against you and there's very, very little chance of success. Putting your life savings, your kids' college fund, all your belongings into a single roll of the dice in Vegas, well, at least in my estimation, that's not necessarily an intelligent risk. So we're not talking about those all or none kinds of situations where the fear or danger is significantly greater than the chance of opportunity. Instead, we're talking about intelligent risks, those where the potential downside is limited, but the potential upside is virtually unlimited. And those are the kinds of risks that we should jump to take. We do this in everyday life too. Maybe we just don't think of it this way, but think about times when maybe you've asked someone out on a date. The worst case, the downside, is that you're going to get a one-time embarrassing rejection. But the best case, the upside, is that you end up with a lifelong relationship with your soulmate. So you've got to get past the 30 seconds of discomfort and go for it. Here's another example. Right? Maybe you're thinking about asking for a raise or a promotion. The worst case downside is that your boss says no. The best case upside is that you get a permanent raise or a promotion, whatever it is that you're asking for. Or maybe you're thinking about joining a club. The worst case, the downside, is that it's a waste of some of your time and then you end up quitting. The best case upside is that you form lifelong friendships, you have a great time, and a ton of other benefits. Or maybe you're thinking about learning something new, which is a risk. You feel a little vulnerable when you don't know something. Maybe you're thinking of taking a cooking class. Here again, the worst case downside, if we're objective about it, is that you waste a little time and money. The best case upside, by contrast, is that you permanently become a better chef and you end up inviting us all over for dinner. So we have to look at both. We have to look at what's the upside and what's the downside. Don't let emotions override that rational look at what could be. Now, we're also, of course, sometimes paralyzed by this whole notion of the two coming together, that what we're risking is that we might fail. So I'd like to invite you to think about a situation, a real one, that you're facing right now, something that might feel really risky to you right now. And with that situation in mind, go ahead and answer these questions that are on screen. These are meant to help you assess your real risk and determine what the failure could do for you if you owned it. So first you have to go there. You have to think about both the best case scenario and the worst possible outcome. Let me encourage you to be proportionate. If you are going to be catastrophizing, thinking about all sorts of dovetail effects that come from your worst possible outcome, and you take it to the nth degree, maybe even into the slightly ludicrous, okay, but be proportionate. Do the same thing when it comes to the best case scenario. And when you have both your best case and your worst case proportionately in balance, then think about the courage qualities that you could be accessing in this situation, the ones that perhaps are already your strength, your resilience, your self-motivation, your confidence, your tenacity, your passion, your desire to improve the status quo, and your interest in being comfortable making decisions in the midst of ambiguity, your ability to do that. So what can you access here that could help you to take this risk? And in the event that you fail, because you might, and it's okay if you do, we all do, if you fail, what are the potential upsides of that? What are the learning opportunities? What are the things that you're going to discover about yourself and others? What will you eliminate so that you now have clarity about the better options? What will you potentially be able to replicate so that you're halfway there If failure is your vehicle to success and you fail, well, you're closer to your destination. What are the upsides that you could learn? And how could you potentially make progress if you do fail? Having asked yourself those questions about the situation you have in mind, you have to also ask yourself, given all of that, what else is going on here? What else might still be holding you back? And you've got to get honest with yourself. By the way, if this is something that you experience over and over again, you might find it's helpful to work with a coach. A certified credentialed coach on a short-term basis could probably help you to really look at things differently. So consider in these situations, if you want to make some significant change and be able to look at situations differently, consider the possibility of working with a coach. And once you know where you want to go, what your goal is, what you can learn along the way, what might still be holding you back, despite the fact that there are those circumstances and those realities and perceptions that are holding you back, you're still in control. Those perceptions aren't in control, and some of those realities might not be in control either. Maybe you have some influence or you can make some small steps. So what are they? What are the next steps that you could take to get closer and closer to the eventual outcome that you're looking for? I'd like to challenge you to try something that you might not have before. I'd like to challenge you with this new perspective about failure in mind to consider trying something. And I'd like to offer to you that I'll be your accountability coach. I'll work with you a little bit on this. I would love to hear your success stories. I'd enjoy hearing your obstacles along the way. I'd enjoy the opportunity to have a short conversation with you and to be able to help you see things perhaps differently. And if you want to take me up on that, well, you've got my website in the presenter to audience announcements. You've got my LinkedIn in the attachments and links so that we can be connected there. You are certainly welcome to email me at deb.calvert@peoplefirstps.com. But let's do it. Let's see what happens. I'm going to give you an opportunity here, too, to post any questions that you might have, questions that you think might help others in the audience that are okay for us to talk about as a full group. Because what we're looking for are frequent mistakes, failing more often. You could stay in your comfort zone right where you are in a status quo bubble. But, you know, if you do that, you're always going to end up in reactive mode because the world's going to keep changing around us anyway. And the ambiguity and the discomfort that we're forced to deal in will be somebody else's to control. But if we're the ones that own everything, even our failures, and our choices about when to be courageous, we're probably going to make more mistakes. And that's a good thing. The more mistakes we make, the closer and closer we get to knowing what the mistakes are and what the opposite of those mistakes will be. And those are the stepping stones that take us to the place we really want to be. That's how we get to that place where we are succeeding and achieving what we want to achieve. And this is not all pie in the sky. This is real. I know I've talked to you in ways that seem a bit lofty, but they're also practical. What I'm describing to you is actionable and practical and doable, and you don't need any special training. You don't need to wait and have some characteristics fall upon you. You've got everything you need. You just have to make those deliberate choices. At People First Productivity Solutions, we do offer coaching, individually, one-to-one, to help people work through issues like this. And we offer webinars, and we offer keynote addresses, and we offer training classes to help groups of people see themselves as leaders and step into their full potential as leaders. The work we do unleashes potential in people. It gets the elephants in the room out of the way. I encourage you to be in touch with me. Go ahead and contact me directly. Come over to our website, subscribe to our Connect community so that you can get our blog, subscribe to this channel, whatever you think is going to be of value for you, and come back next month for another presentation here on this channel. Thanks very much for being here today. I hope to hear from you soon.